Okay, so here is the lecture part 2 of the week 5, and then we are going to talk about the role of eye movements in conscious vision. The last part of the video might have missed some of the slides, so I'll just go quickly. So after this, we talked about motion and its metacognition of the peripheral vision, and then I also introduced the Dan Dennett's video and radio show here. So if you didn't see the slides together with the lecture contents, just go and slide the page to see what the link was. Okay, and then this is a summary, but I didn't have much slides to say. Okay, so roles of eye movements. So Dan Dennett and other people who claim about the illusory nature of this peripheral vision tend to make a reference to this figure. So here, as I mentioned in the last initial part of the lecture, important thing to realize is that these axis on the axis is density, okay? And also it's not zero. It's always above zero for the cones. So there is always a chance for the cone to be active to explain the color phenomenology, and how vivid it is, that's a question. But one of the things that all these people also say is that you actually do not see the color in the periphery, at least very well, because of the lower density of the cones at the periphery. But somehow we feel color in the periphery, okay? And the why, that's needs to be explained. So, one possible explanation is this. So because we move the eyes all around to see color in the periphery, and we are unaware that we are seeing the color at the fovea. So every time we feel like we see the color in the periphery, it is because of the memory and the expectation of the color that we directly look at the fovea, and then comes back to the other location, and they still remember or reconstruct the experience around the periphery. That's one explanation. Here, the eye movement comes to the center of the scene. One important fact to remember, which I might actually examine in the quiz, is that we move the eyes 3 times per second. But most of us are not really aware of this fact. 3 times per second is relatively a lot, but usually we are not aware of each of the eye movements. And this is a big puzzles of eye movements and the conscious vision, actually. And as I said, you move the eyes a lot, but are you normally aware of each eye movement? If I ask, most of the people probably say no. And then if I also ask, can you become aware of when your eye movements happen? Then if you pay attention to it, most people say yes. For example, if I say, like, oh yes, there was an eye movement, yeah, I can totally be aware of that if I pay attention to it. But normally, no. And this already hints at the relationship between the attention and the consciousness. And something that we will be discussing starting from next week is that whether attention is always necessary to become aware of the movements, such as eye movements, actions, and so on. Okay. And then the third question is that during the eye movements, can we actually see things? This is also, again, a very, very fundamental question. If there are 3 eye movements per second, and if we are not aware of it, what are we actually experiencing during this eye movement? This is really weird, okay? And you normally do not think about this. But once you start to think about this, some of you may not be able to sleep at night. This is very weird kind of situation. So again, eye movements and conscious vision. To see this effect, what I want you to do is the following demo. Okay, face to your friend, face to face, or record your face with a video. Okay, like Zoom is one way of doing it, and then try yourself or ask the friend to move the eyes from right to left like this. Okay, maybe, you know, if I just stop sharing the screen here, and if you see it, my eyes like this, then the question is whether you can actually see my eye movements. Okay. Now, then the important thing to try is for you to go in front of the mirror and then look at your own face, and especially pay attention to your left eye, and then move your eyes or your focus to your right eye. And then see whether you can see the quick eye movements of yourself. Okay. If part one allows you to see other people's eye movements, then that means that your vision or conscious vision has enough sensitivity to see the quick eye movements by eye. Okay. However, if the part two says that, you know, by doing this part two demo by yourself and you can't see your eye movements, then there is something you know, interesting going on. You are not seeing things while during your Saccade eye movements, quick Saccades. Okay. And in fact, this is known as a Saccadic suppression in vision science. So here is, you know, the paper coming relatively recently, but the phenomenon itself is known for a really long time. It's called the Saccadic suppression. So what this type of the research does is, for example, ask the participants to look at some kind of target initially, and then make an eye movement, a saccade, to this, you know, bright spot as fast as possible. Okay, and then during this period, they also ask, present some kind of a patch here, that is either bright spot or, you know, high contrast or something like that, and then ask people to see whether there was something over there or not. It's a signal detection task, and then using closely you know, timed control measurement device, they can control the timing of this flash and also duration of the flash. And then what typically is observed is that depending on the stimulus, but the proportion of the correct trials, let's say, you know, if there is a, you know, 1 in 4 chance of the success, 25%, people are really good at the detection of this thing, as long as if it's 50 milliseconds before the start of the movement of the eye. Okay, but even before the starting the movement of the eye, you start to not to see this kind of thing. You know, it degrades quite a bit, and then just before, you know, 25 milliseconds or something like that, you can't really, you know, detect it reliably, 50% or 70%. And then during the Saccade, you are making eye movements itself, and that can extend, you know, from 0 to 50 milliseconds or so, depending on the distance you travel. It can be, you know, longer distance, longer duration, and shorter distance, shorter duration. And then after eye stops moving, you know, in this case, this particular paper doesn't align the response with respect to the offset of the stop of the Saccade, but let's assume, which is probably a reasonable thing, that in 50 milliseconds after the Saccade onset, that's the time when eye stop moving. Still, you can't really see and detect this kind of stimulus. And it takes roughly 100 milliseconds to recover the normal visual threshold. Okay, so what it means in our life is that every time when we make an eye movement, before and after, there is a period where you are not seeing things very well. And that happens 3 times a second. And still, we are not really aware of this period as a blank period or anything like that. So our experience is likely to be more continuous. However, depending on the time of the saccade, there is a significant editing going on, so that something that happens before and after is stitched together to make it continuous kind of experience. Okay. So let's move on. And eye movement, so that's a fact about saccadic suppression. And the next is that when we make an eye movement, how fast we can make an eye movements to the target. This becomes important to design the experiment where you want to exclude the possibility of contamination of the results due to the eye movements. This is just one particular example of the experiment by Kirchner and so. But what it shows is that when you have a fixation cross like this in the beginning, and then that's presented for roughly 1 second to 1/2 second, and then it disappears. That's an actually important thing. Disappears for 200 milliseconds, and this is a fixed time. And then if you flash the image really briefly, then people can make a saccade to the direction of the animal or face or target car or something like that. This is called ultra rapid vision. So this is called electrooculography, EOG. And then it measures the voltage and deflection around the eye by putting some kind of electrode. And then you can see that there is some kind of fluctuation at the baseline, and then 0 time where the people presented the picture. Within 120 milliseconds, 125 milliseconds, I can start to depart to this target location here. So that's the location of this one. This x-axis position is converted into the voltage here. That means that the brain can process the image within 100 to 25 milliseconds and already execute eye movements. And this puts a bound, the lower bound of the recognition capability of the visual system to be roughly at least like 80 milliseconds or so. Otherwise, there is a time to take for the neuron, the brain to compute the eye movement signal, eye movement plan, and then execute that. Whether this is happening at the conscious level or not, that's unclear right now, and it's again active area of the research right now. We don't know the answer whether this is a consciously mediated or not. Most likely not. Okay. But for our purpose, what's important is that even at this extremely idealized situation of the eye movement, where you remove the fixation point, this actually is very important to reduce the inhibition. And then if you know the timing of the stimulus, then you can finally make an eye movement at 125 milliseconds. So that means that if you remove some of these conditions, then your eye movements can take roughly 200 milliseconds or 250 milliseconds. And further on, by combining this, our knowledge from the saccadic suppression, we can also estimate that the vision before and after the saccade is also not available to the brain. So this means that we can reduce the eye movement confound when we are probing the experience in the periphery. So what it means, the most direct way to do it, to examine the philosopher's claim, such as Dennett, we can measure the eye movements. And this is becoming easier and easier, and some of the virtual reality kind of goggle can have it inside. And so, this is another interesting direction for the consciousness research, but, measuring the exact eye movement, like, the paper I presented is going to be important, or present the stimulus for a brief period, like less than 250 milliseconds, and present them in a random timing and position. And then that way, we can remove the possibility that, any saccade eye movement towards the stimulus in the periphery makes the vision blurry and also less visible. And any incoming signal is strongly attenuated. And therefore, we can remove the confound of eye movements, expectation, and attention, and so on. All right, so I introduced Ariel's task last week. And if you haven't done that, I would encourage you to participate in this similarity task by following this link or link in the Moodle. And basically what we are asking you to do is to make a judgment about the similarity of the color in the fovea and also periphery in the display. And then to ask whether you can actually make a consistent and a very good judgment about the color at both of the locations when we adjust the stimulus size, okay? And if you haven't tried that, I encourage you to do that. Okay, so then the summary, which is not conclusive at the moment because, this is, as I said, still, controversial kind of topic. We fooled the experience color in the periphery because of the non-conscious eye movements, and most likely brief presentation of peripheral stimuli can address this question, and your own experience and your own judgment will matter. And then let's see whether that's going to be either similar or different at the fovea or periphery, okay? And then as a side note, I would say that we cannot see well during the Saccade. This is Saccadic suppression. And as I said and emphasized, Saccadic suppression should be happening every, in the beginning and the end of every 3 Saccades per second, but we don't see it. And what we are experiencing is, in a sense, edited word. And how does it, come about to this experience is really one of the hard problems that we are now getting, closer to. So the next part of the video is going to talk about this neural mechanism of the peripheral vision.